The Western colonial project is to portray Muslim women as being oppressed, subjugated, and in need of being rescued. The West has forfeited their right to lecture us on human rights. I mean, raining bombs on women and children in hospitals. This is a grotesque violation of human rights. So it's as if they're saying, why should the conventional Western way of education be considered the standard that should be adopted by Afghanistan or by any country for that matter?
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, Abdul Rahman, how are you?
I'm good, Sheikh. Alhamdulillah. Recently, it's been reported that Afghanistan have planned to ban medical training and midwifery courses. What are your views on this matter?
Yes, so that's correct. That's the news we've heard. Prior to this, secondary education as well as universities were also banned for women in Afghanistan. However, women studying in medical institutions, studying midwifery and and to become nurses, that was permissible. Now this recent ban has extended to include the banning of women studying midwifery as well as nursing, which is quite surprising for even the Taliban standard. I mean, from an Islamic perspective, to seek knowledge is at times compulsory and at times recommended for both men and women. So a lot of us are also asking the same question.
So, Sheikh, what do you mean that seeking knowledge is compulsory at times and at times recommended?
So with regards to knowledge of religion, whatever a Muslim has to practice to fulfill the commandments of Allah, then knowledge of that is also compulsory. So for example, salat, 5 times prayer is compulsory. So seeking knowledge of that, of prayer, is also compulsory. Then we have worldly sciences. So for example, in every community, we need doctors, we need engineers, we need farmers even. So if hypothetically one community does not have sufficient doctors, then it becomes a religious obligation on that community to produce enough doctors to cater for that community. And likewise, if they need to produce farming and crops, so then it becomes the religious obligation of that community to ensure that they have enough people trained in farming and the likes.
Okay, so what has been the response?
The response to the Taliban banning midwifery and nursing, of course the Western media will just take this as another opportunity to lecture the world, the Muslim world, on women's rights and on human rights and how grave a violation it is to deprive women of education. Look, while what they say may have some merit, but really the West has forfeited their right to lecture us on human rights. I mean, raining bombs on women and children in hospitals. This is a grotesque violation of human rights. So I don't think that they're in any position to be the moral policeman and lecture the Muslim world on human rights and women's rights. Yeah. Even, you can say, the 20 years that they occupied Afghanistan, there were women and children being bombed, civilians being bombed. That is more of a gross violation of women's rights than depriving them of education. Now, from a Muslim's perspective and from an Islamic point of view, seeking knowledge is also compulsory for women, at times compulsory, at times recommended, at times permissible. Yeah? Depends on the importance of that knowledge, as we touched upon just before. So Mufti Taqi Usmani, who's a prominent scholar of the Muslim world, considered an authority, he wrote a letter to the leadership of Taliban, in particular to the chief, the Emir of Taliban, Hibatullahi Akhundzada. Now this was in 2022. And he emphasized the need for educating women and that the girls' schools and universities should be reopened in Afghanistan. Yeah, he also mentioned that the enemies of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, the Taliban, They'll use this as a propaganda tool to prevent, Taliban, or prevent Afghanistan from even being recognized as a legitimate country, because they have violated, they have violated women's rights by not allowing girls to go to school. So he mentioned that this is used as a propaganda tool. Now, as Muslims, we are of the view that it's necessary to make appropriate arrangements for women to be educated.
Okay, so this is not the teaching of Islam to deprive women of education, correct?
Definitely not. No, as mentioned, that women have a right to seek knowledge, and in some cases, the seeking of that knowledge is compulsory and a religious obligation. Now, let's see what the Taliban's perspective is. Why have they banned? If we have a look at this video from one of the spokesmen of Taliban, he's interviewed by Dili Hussain from 5 Pillars, and let's see what he has to say.
But overall, the narrative that the Islamic Emirate is against the education of women is incorrect. It is malicious attempt to tarnish the image of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. They have opened other avenues, whether it's through madrasas, homeschooling, online schooling, other avenues. As for what the challenges are in terms of reopening these schools, it's not only limited to logistics, finances, budget, but there's a range of other issues that when the relevant ministries can find a solution to, inshallah, there will be a resolution to the entire situation as deemed fit and appropriate for Afghanistan.
So from this interview, it's evident that the Taliban are not fundamentally opposed to women's education, nor have they imposed an absolute ban on women's learning. You can see that they still have the options of online learning, homeschooling, and what was the other? Homeschooling. And also, this is not mentioned a lot by Western media, but they also have religious madrasas, religious schools where academic topics are also taught.
So if it's not un-Islamic for them to prevent education, why have they done it?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and there might be more than one reason for this. First of all, it's not a permanent ban. It's only a temporary ban. That's what they said from the beginning. Perhaps they don't have the financial capability to provide education for girls in what they would consider to be Sharia compliant. There should be, obviously they don't believe in intermingling. They don't believe that men and women should be studying together. They don't have free mixing between the two genders in classes. That's one reason. So perhaps for them to be able to facilitate segregation at what they would consider to be appropriate, then they would need, finance. They would need a budget to be able to do that, which they don't have now, and they probably see other priorities that are more urgent to be dealt with: roads, other aspects of the economy, trade, and so on. So probably it's not as high on their list. It's as if they're saying, why should the conventional Western way of education be considered the standard that should be adopted by Afghanistan or by any country for that matter? We reject the notion, they say, that the West gets to decide and define what is proper education. Yeah? The West doesn't recognize that the madrasa system is considered a form of education. Yeah? You look at the population of Afghanistan is 42 million. The population of Kabul itself is 5 million. Yeah? Now, 20 years that the US and its allies occupied Afghanistan, apart from the city of Kabul and maybe a few other cities, did they establish any system for women education? Did they manage to facilitate education for the majority of the population that lived in the rural areas? They didn't. Or why is there such scrutiny on the Taliban for these few years when they have other priorities? I mean, you've frozen $9 billion of their money. Yeah? So they have a lot more issues to worry about. And even before this, they've been through war after war. You had the war against the Soviets, they recovered, and the Taliban, the first initial, when they were in power. Then after that, you had the war against America and their allies for another 20 odd years. So they've just been recovering, and the population, majority of them are just worried about surviving. As difficult as it is for us to understand, education was not such a priority for women. They were just worried about surviving. Now, also we should consider that they reject the notion that the conventional Western method of education should be the standard that should be adopted by Afghanistan or by any country for that matter. They are also aware that Western education is the path to liberalization and introducing Western culture, which they oppose. It's as if they're telling the West that, look, we fought against you occupying and colonizing our land for the last 20 years, and we're not going to allow you to mentally colonize the Muslims of Afghanistan by importing Western values through your education system. And I'll give you an example. The Western colonial project is to portray Muslim women as being oppressed, subjugated, and in need of being rescued from their so-called uncivilized, barbaric, misogynistic societies, male-dominated societies. Yeah? This narrative is deliberately linked with the fight against terrorism.
How so?
I'll give you an example. When the public opinion on the war in Afghanistan in the US started to shift, and the public sentiment was opposition to the war, yeah, then what they done is they used this type of language to justify military occupations. In the US, when public sentiment started to shift and oppose the war in Afghanistan, women's rights was weaponized as a propaganda strategy to reinforce support for the military campaign.
Sheikh, could you give us an example of how education is used to influence people towards Western culture?
Okay, let's say now Western values have changed over the last few decades even. Now they consider the ideology of LGBT and sexual orientation and gender identity and so on. They believe in this, yeah? And now they want to export it to the whole world. And perhaps the Muslim world is the last place of resistance, is one of the last places of resistance. Now, you have what you call women and gender studies. Yeah? Women and gender studies program was introduced in the University of Kabul in 2015. Yeah? Now, what does women and gender studies entail? Part of it is to teach this ideology, to that sexual orientation, sexual gender identity. These programs promote ideologies that challenge traditional roles and beliefs of a Muslim, redefining normative understandings of gender and sexual orientations. So when you introduce these ideas, and another thing, the West is very much obsessed with individualism, yeah? Whereas in Islam, we place more emphasis on the community and family as opposed to our own individual preferences, yeah? So these institutions aim to influence how women view their identities and how women view their roles. Now they look upon motherhood as something regressive, or something even looked down upon, that, oh, you're only a mother, you're only a housewife. Whereas in Islam, motherhood is celebrated. It's a very respected, lofty position, because mothers are seen as the cornerstone of nurturing and educating the future generations. Yet in Western society, motherhood may be looked down upon. There's more emphasis, rather than raising children and being part of a family, an important cog of a family unit, there's more emphasis on my own professional career, yeah, and professional achievements as opposed to the family unit. There may be other reasons that we are not aware of that led the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, the Taliban, to suddenly impose a ban on women studying in medical institutions. It's possible that certain incidents occurred that they found unacceptable. We don't know. There are many things that we're not privy to.
Sheikh, as we were working on this interview, we just received reports that the Taliban government says it will close all national and foreign non-government organizations employing women in Afghanistan. Why would they do that?
Why would they ban or even revoke the licenses of these NGOs, non-government organizations, that employ women? Look, from what we understand of our Afghan community here that go back and forth to Afghanistan, when you land at the airport, you have women stamping their passports. So it's obvious, from that we understand that the Taliban are not opposed to women working outright, absolutely, no. But what they did request, or what they did instruct, was that women who work, they should meet with the strict dress code and implement their Sharia compliant dress code according to their interpretation. Now, perhaps they felt that these NGOs were not implementing that dress code, hence they plan to close them down for not implementing. Or if you continue to employ women and they are not abiding by their dress code, then we will close you down. It seems like that. This is only just speculation. We really need to ask them why they're doing that. Like I said, it would be good to have one of their spokesmen here for an interview, online interview in the future.
And the second report was that the Taliban have banned windows to stop women from being seen at home. Is this too much?
Banning windows from which women can be seen in their private areas, courtyards, kitchens, and so on. Now, look, before I answer this question, and again, it's just speculation, we really need to ask them this, but I'm just looking at it from the Sharia perspective. Before we comment on this, let's have a look at what Abdul Qahar Balkhi has to say, one of the spokesmen, regarding the concept of women covering in Islam.
What is the teaching around the wearing of a burqa? Why is it something that is necessary?
So that is from your point of view. From our point of view, women being sexualized and objectified is something that is unacceptable. But again, this is a distinction. I'm just trying to get across the fact that there's different understandings of how humans should live. You base your values on something, laws that are different than what we base our laws on.
They're trying to protect women from being seen. It's not a restriction for women. It's actually more of a restriction for men so that they are not looking at women in their private areas when women may not be covered in an appropriate manner. And that's how they'll explain it. But like I said, we have to ask them. So it seems like they're trying to protect women and to not have women exposed in their society, in their country. In the West, I guess we have this concept of freedom, that women and men should be able to dress in the way that they like, whereas in the Taliban, they don't give you that freedom. But then, according to his answer here...
It feels to me that women are being hidden away. And that's the impression that you get. But I take your point.
Are the nuns hidden away?
Increasingly they're not. Nuns have moved on and they don't, a lot of them now don't wear habits, and yeah, they progress too. That's, I guess that's
so
the point.
Throwing away the veil, that means it's progress.
Well, no, maybe. Maybe it is.
Again, if by throwing away the veil you mean it's progress, then we're not progressing ever. If by progress you mean scientific, social, economic development, we have progressed. We're actually the pioneers in those fields.
I think, again, I don't want to labour this point, but I think throwing away the veil, it's not about progression, it's about choice. It's about having the choice to do something, and that does seem to be denied people here.
Does the Western society give people the choice to walk around naked? Without any clothes?
They give people personal choice to dress how they wish.
No, in public.
Will they give them the choice? They give them personal choice.
Do they give women and men the choice to walk around in public absolutely naked?
You wouldn't walk around absolutely naked. That would be indecent.
Do they have the choice to do it legally, without being arrested?
In their own home, in public?
No, in public.
In public, no, they wouldn't. That would be indecent. But they do have the choice to wear what they want.
And that is what we're saying. In their private homes, they can wear whatever they want. But in public, they have to have modesty.
He's saying, no, even the West has restrictions. You can wear what you like at home. You can choose to be without clothes at home. But once you are in public, there's a certain dress code that you have to abide by. And the West has this. Yeah, also, you can't, as he mentioned, you can't walk around without clothes. You can't be naked. So likewise, they have enforced certain rules that for them, you can't expose certain parts. Like men have to be clothed in a men also have to cover up their aura. We have this concept of aura in Islam, which every man must, minimum, they must at least cover that portion of the body, which is from your navel to your knee. That's the minimum. For women, then there's differences of opinion. So they've taken the more stricter interpretation where women should not expose any part of their body in front of men who are not their relatives or their husbands without any reason to do so, without any need to do so. What do I mean by need? For example, for doctors, in the absence of women doctors, in such cases, then men may treat women.
So, Sheikh, do we need to be concerned for the women of Afghanistan?
What we see on the news and in front of cameras is only a small percentage of women in Afghanistan. The greater percentage, as we say, as we mentioned before, there are 42 million people in Afghanistan. Yeah, so the majority of women don't appear on camera. The majority of women, that is their culture, and it has been for centuries. Yeah, their culture. So they have no issues whatsoever. Now, of course, there are the women that have been used to the freedoms, or there are women that agree with the liberal lifestyle or the freedoms that are found in Western societies. So for those women, perhaps they prefer that type of lifestyle, but you can't say that that's a representation of all the women of Afghanistan. So I guess what we should be thinking is that why does the West have the right to implement their values on other countries that may not want them, that may not agree with those values? Yeah? Just because the West agrees with certain principles and values, yeah, why does the whole world have to accept that as the standard? If the West says that same-sex marriage is okay, if the West believe in LGBTQ ideologies, why should we make the rest of the world accept these principles when it's not part of their culture and they don't want it, quite frankly?
Thank you for this discussion, Sheikh.
Thank you, Abdurrahman. Jazakallah khairan.
If you liked this episode of TBN, please make sure to like, subscribe and share for future videos. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.